All right. Well, tonight we are fortunate enough to hear from two guest speakers, not one as previously advertised, but two. First, we're going to hear from Hannah Floyd. Hannah is a sophomore studying ecology and evolutionary biology and Spanish at Princeton University. She's broadly interested in natural history and ecology, especially herps, birds, arthropods, and scientific name etymologies. She hopes to combine a career in biochemistry and marine science. Hannah is an officer with the Princeton Conservation Society, and she's published several scientific and popular articles and is a frequent speaker at nature and science events. After Hannah, we will hear from Ted Floyd. Ted Floyd is the editor of Birding Magazine, the award-winning flagship publication of the American Birding Association. He's written 5 bird books, and he has 3 more scheduled for publication this year. How does he find time to go birding? My goodness. Ted is also the author of more than 200 popular articles, technical papers, and book chapters on birds and nature. He's especially interested in analyzing bird vocalizations, in interpreting birds and nature for children and beginners, and in applying new media and emerging technologies toward the appreciation of nature. Please join me in welcoming Hannah and Ted.
So despite what John said, I'm going to go first very, very, very briefly, then turn it over to Hannah. Then I think it'll go back to me if you all want to hear from me also. Anyhow, thanks very much, John, for the introduction. I think we're all here now. We've got the Zoomers out there somewhere and the rumors out here. The rumors, they are the Zoomers. Okay, so let me just sort of give you a feel for what's going on this evening, and then we'll get on with the program. So well, I was here almost exactly 365 days ago. I think we were 366 days ago or something like that. But I was here in early January last year, and I dimly recall that I spoke to you all about stealth birds, about sort of the common, ordinary birds in our midst that we maybe don't pay all that much attention to, but that do sort of really, really cool things. And one bird I neglected to tell you all about last year. It's really one of the cool. Oh, should I reorient? You're fine. Is this good? I'm good. Cool. That thing is. I'm going to stand off with it. Anyhow, what bird I neglected to talk to you all about last year is a really, really cool stealth bird. It's going to be one of the major subjects of this evening's presentations, plural, and that is the Cooper's hawk, a bird that is all over Fort Collins and Boulder, where I live, Denver, and pretty much all over the rest of the United States and Canada and other places. But my daughter Hannah, who was just back now on break, and I got to talking about this and about her sort of some of the stuff that she's been doing on, again, common and ordinary organisms that are sort of extraordinary. You think about them. I thought to myself, well, you want to come up to Fort Collins with me? And she said, sure. I said, want to give a talk? And she said, so here she is on almost no notice at all. So I really, really appreciate that Hannah has agreed or been forcibly conscripted. I think she's agreed to pitch in and actually talk about something that has nothing specifically to do with Cooper's hawks at all, but is sort of thematically connected to this idea of common birds that do uncommon things. I think there will even be a raptorial theme or focus to what she's saying. So Hannah, I'm going to pass the baton off to you here, and good luck pressing buttons and everything else like that. So we'll hear from Hannah for, I think we gave her 2 hours, and I get 4 hours, and we'll be done by 2 in the morning.
Okay, can y'all on Zoom, am I good standing here? Or should I move?
That's a good spot.
Perfect.
Hold the microphone really close to me.
Can you guys hear me? If I go like that?
Yeah.
Really close. Okay, I'm a pop star now. Okay, let me make sure. Let me see how this works.
Use it down there. You might have to click once.
Let's figure this out.
No.
You hit the space bar. Is that weird? There we go. Perfect. Okay. Can you all hear me with this? This is weird talking into this. Okay, cool. So like everyone has said, my name is Hannah. I am a current sophomore at Princeton University out in Jersey. And tonight I'm going to be talking briefly about some of the work that I did this past summer. I was an intern in Costa Rica. Specifically, I was in the Osa Peninsula, which is basically as far south as you can get before you're in Panama. And I was doing a combination of things there, but I was mostly working with moths and then sea turtles, which will be an important theme. Somehow we'll connect that to these raptors that you see up here. But as the title slide says, I will be talking tonight a little bit about birds of prey, and specifically birds of prey that I documented while I was out a lot of the times very early in the morning on the beach. And specifically, we'll be talking about interordinal alloprene, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I know that's a lot of jargon, but we'll get there in a bit. So first, before we get on with that, I want to kind of set the scene for where I was. As I said, I was in the Osa Peninsula, which is a very, if you imagine Costa Rica, I know a lot of you probably think about jungles and cloud forests, and there is that, of course, but where I was, it was actually very, very beachy. So I could, from my cabin where I was staying, you could hear the ocean waves crashing at night, as well as all of the frogs and all the owls at night as well. So it was a really, really cool spot to be. And I was there for close to 3 months. And this is the view that I woke up to every morning. I had to be at the beach every morning by 3:30 a.m. And I had to stay there until 9 a.m. because I was working with sea turtles. And if any of y'all have worked with sea turtles, you'll know that their whims are not aligned with the human sleep schedule, and they will lay their eggs from anywhere between 12 in the morning and 4 in the morning. So we had to be there right when they were laying those eggs because there was a lot of poaching and then other predators that we'll get to in a bit. That is me collecting eggs. I know it looks like I'm collecting trash. Those are actually turtle eggs. That's not trash, quite the opposite. But that is how you collect turtle eggs in Costa Rica and where we were. You had to work pretty quickly. We'd find the holes and then we would dig them up and then put them into eggs and then relocate them to a hatchery where they would be safe from predators as well as poachers. It was always a lot of fun. And that was me one particular morning with my collection. And just for context also, that's about 150 turtle eggs that we'd collect. Single turtles the ones that we were working with olive ridley specifically. And they could lay anywhere between 90 and about 190 eggs. Okay, then a couple other creatures that we saw on the beach while I was out there. The first one in the top left corner, that is a punched stone crab. These are pretty common in the tide pools. And then we also had a lot of iguanas in the other corner, and then some cool mammals as well. So howler monkeys,
Sorry.
no worries. A very charismatic monkey that makes the very, I guess, kind of famous howlings. And I don't want to imitate that because it might sound like I'm trying to summon a demon, but that is what they sound like. That's actually a young one. That's a baby. And they would hang out in the palm trees and eat the leaves and everything else. And then coatis. These are actually my worst enemy as a turtle egg saver. These this is actually how I usually found the nest. I would find a coati digging in the sand, and then I would know there was a turtle egg nest, and I had to go and chase off a coati with a stick because coatis are the worst nightmare for us. They will ravage turtle egg nests, and that's part of the reason why we had to work at such ungodly hours, because if we didn't, the coatis would get there before us, or the poachers, but it was 1.5 dozen. And then birds. I know we're here mostly to talk about birds, so here's my transition to talking about birds for tonight. This was one of the most common birds that we would see out on the beach. By chance, does anyone know what this is? Yeah, bare-throated tiger heron, cool. So these were really, really common out, especially on the tide pools. The beach was a nice mix of kind of like really soft sand where the turtles would come and lay their eggs, and then also these really big, we called it the rocks. The tide pools, these would hunt crabs and other crustaceans as well as gastropods, basically anything that was out there on the rocks. Question.
What kind of tiger heron?
This is a bare-throated tiger heron. Yeah. Okay. And then now we're going to transition a little bit to the birds of prey that we were talking about. So there were two really common birds of prey that we would see out on the beach. One of these was the black vulture. You can see the nice palm fronds in the background. And then the next one that we're going to talk about is the crested caracara. This was actually not at the beach. This was from the jungle. But we were able to see these a lot out on the beach. This one kind of interesting. You can see that it kind of has this little like knob thing on its like on the front part of its body. And this is actually a part of how it feeds before it can kind of digest whatever it eats, whether it's a unsuspecting turtle egg, unfortunately, or closer. Sorry. Okay. I feel like I'm eating it, but anyways, this is kind of before they digest their food. It would be stored in this. It's not just that part. I thought when I first took this photo that it was just that part, but it actually goes quite deep into their body. And this is where they kind of store their food before it's digested into the stomach. And obviously humans, we don't have this, but this is something that the caracaras do have. But tonight, the main thing I want to talk about before I hand things over to my dad is this really interesting behavior that I observed one morning out on the beach. I think this picture was probably taken right around 7 in the morning or something. The sunrise is quite early there in the summertime. And so one morning we were out just looking for turtle eggs, chasing off coatis, whatever. We'd also have to chase off black vultures as well as crested caracaras, because once the coatis got the eggs and ravaged the nests, then all sorts of other critters would come along, including black vultures. So if we saw a big gathering of black vultures on the horizon, one of us would have to sprint ahead to scare off all the birds and save whatever nests that we could. But here you can see a really interesting behavior, and you can see that the black vulture here is actually preening or cleaning the crested caracara. And this is a juvenile crested caracara here. And this specific behavior, as I mentioned earlier, is called interordinal allopreening. It's interordinal because crested caracaras and black vultures are in different orders. And this behavior of cleaning another bird, probably they're looking for parasites and cleaning that off, is not well documented. It was first documented in the literature, at least, in a paper that was published back in 1984. And since then, there's only been a couple of published documentations. I did not publish this, and I do not plan to publish this in a journal or whatever, but this is a very unusual behavior, and scientists still aren't quite sure what causes this or what prompts the birds to do this, but I think the next slide I have a video, and hopefully this will work. We'll see. There we go. Okay, so let me see if I can get rid of that. Okay, maybe I'll go in the next slide. But so you could see in that video that the black vulture goes and kind of cleans off the feathers on the crested caracara, and then it goes to clean its own feathers. And my dad and I were talking about this and trying to hypothesize what might be going on, and we were wondering, we of course have, well, at least I have no idea, this is all pure speculation, if there was some kind of parasite or something on the crested caracara that could have been beneficial in a way for the black vulture, but alas, I do not know. Maybe someone else does, and maybe this would be a really interesting thing to study in the future. And then one other cool thing that was just me kind of geeking out about reading papers, but between black vultures and crested caracaras, the interordinal allopreening has always only been observed between black vultures doing the actual cleaning. They've never seen, at least in the papers that I've read, crested caracaras reciprocating that in any way. It's always been the black vulture. I have another slide. Okay, yes. So I guess I kind of wanted to end my portion. And of course, you can talk to me later about this if you have any questions, but the majority of this is for my dad. But black vultures and crested caracaras, where they occur, not so much here in Colorado, are very common. At where I go to school in Jersey, black vultures are a common sight. This was taken from my dorm room. There's a big tower right next to where I live, and black vultures routinely roost there in the dying afternoon light, as you can see here. So it's really cool to me to go somewhere like Costa Rica or anywhere else and see these birds that, you know, I see basically on the daily. I don't see crested caracaras in New Jersey. That would be really cool. But I see black vultures pretty much on the daily in New Jersey. And then when I was in Costa Rica, I saw them every single day. And it's just really cool to me to see these raptors and observe these behaviors. I didn't even know what allopreening was until I observed that this summer. And just, there's always something new that you can learn about species that are really, really common. And I think that will be the theme that I will hand this off to my dad about raptors. If you have any questions, you can find me at the end, but thank you for that. And with that, I'll hand off to my dad.
We'll take question for both speakers at the end.
Oh, I was just gonna ask about that. So I guess just remember your questions for Hannah, and we'll deal with that at the end. Sounds good to me. All righty, well, from black vultures atop a spire in New Jersey, we're going to go to a black screen here for a moment now, but just want to make sure we had the appropriate, oh, I'm over here. Oh, keep. Oh, no, I wanted it black. Oh, you know.
Go ahead,
just keep
going.
All right, but that is an intentional black screen, you know.
I know, I do know, yes.
All right. Trust the man behind the screen or at the screen or something like that. Well, anyhow, we are going to transition now from black vultures, as I said, in New Jersey to Cooper's hawks, sort of right here in Colorado. Almost all the images I'm going to be sharing with you all from this evening are from right here in the Northern Front Range metro region, mostly eastern Boulder County, where I live. So these are images by me of Cooper's hawks and a few other birds in here. And as Hannah has already sort of set out here, the theme is going to be the kind of cool and surprising things that very familiar birds do for us. If all goes well, we're going to transition to a introductory image
I know.
right now. Aha, very good. So that is in fact a Cooper's hawk right there, and a lot of words up there, but I'll sort of tell you that all that we're going to be doing three sort of thematic things this evening, all at the same time. I'm going to tell you all about the ways that this bird, the vulture, the Cooper's hawk, has changed over the course of our lifetimes. I'm going to talk about how our knowledge about Cooper's hawks is evolving. I'm also going to talk about more conjecturally or speculatively how the Cooper's hawks have been changing us as well. Almost all of us are aware of the capacity of human beings to change birds and bird populations. I think that birds and bird populations change us too, and we're going to be looking at that. I'm noticing here, and it's fine, this may just be a little bit of a surprise here for me and for all of us. I don't need to see what the next image is, and I do these together this afternoon, so you'll have to bear with me. I may or may not guess the next slide correctly here. I think what the next image is going to be here is going to be a sort of a look back into the past. And that's sort of where I want to start us off here now. I'm going to begin this presentation, not right now at the beginning of the year 2025, but 41 years ago in the year 1984. I'm guessing at least a few of you walked this earth in early 1984. And I want to sort of put you all back in early 1984 and sort of ask you all the question, what were you all doing in early 1984? Well, again, if this is even the next slide here, I think what I'm going to show you all here is that I was engaging birds in nature, and in particular was beginning to give thought to a bird called the Cooper's hawk. So I think my next image is of, yes, indeed, my eBird output from the year 1984. They didn't have eBird in 1984. They didn't really have computers in 1984, but I've gone back into eBird and populated my eBird life list with my first Cooper's hawk back on March 17th, 1984, and a sort of reference species we'll talk about a little bit later on here, the Sharp-shinned Hawk, on April 20th, 1984. As I said, there was no eBird in 1984. However, for those of us who want to date ourselves, they did have paper and pencil back in 1984. And I kept a field notebook, which I still have all those decades worth of field notebook observations until I went over to eBird. And we're going to actually take a look at the exact events of March 17th, 1984. So here's my field notebook from March 17th, and the year here again is 1984. And this was a red letter day for me. I saw a Cooper's hawk, a yearbird number 34, and better yet, a life bird. This was the day of my very first Cooper's hawk. Here's why I'm certain it was a Cooper's hawk. When I first saw it, I thought it was a crow. And one of the key methods of distinguishing the Coopers from the Sharp-shinned is by its size. The Cooper's is defined as quote unquote crow size. The bird also had a long tail, accipiter, rounded like wings, and the tail was rounded. Bear with me, penmanship wise, I was actually quite a bit younger than Hannah at the time that this all went down. I was in my early years in high school. So those are the events of March 17th, 1984. And then about a month later on, what day is this? April something. April 20th, 1984, I saw another life bird. The day's highlight was a sharp-shinned hawk Life bird number 139. Here are the marks I observed. Hippler-like shapes, slim, long-tailed, long wing. The small size seemed no bigger than a large pointing dove. Square tail, even when spread, did not seem too rounded. By the way, I want to commend to everybody, even if you're people Hannah's age and all the rest of us, but writing things down is a really, really, really good discipline. It's really, really cool for me just to be able to go back. And by the way, that was like every single day for 40 years or something like that. Kind of cool to be able to know what I was doing every single day for decades on end. And I can tell you exactly that on April 20th, 1984, I saw my first Sharp-shinned Hawk. So this was back in the day. This is the experience of seeing my first Cooper's Hawk and my first Sharp-shinned Hawk, both of them back in 1984. What I'm going to do now is sort of give a picture for what the Cooper's Hawk was all of. We're going to do Cooper's Hawk, really not Sharp-shinned Hawk anymore now, back like in 1984, and then compare the Cooper's Hawk in 1984 with the Cooper's Hawk in the year 2025, which it now is Happy New Year to all of you. Okay, so here we have two images of two birds. This is actually, we're still doing some Sharp-shinned Hawk here, a Cooper's Hawk on the left and a Sharp-shinned Hawk over here on the right. These two birds, at least in terms of their gross plumage, is practically identical. Back in 1984, it really hit this point a little bit later on here, we thought that Cooper's Hawks and Sharp-shinned Hawks were very, very similar. Turns out that they're not very similar at all. We suffered this mass hysteria for decades, imagining that Cooper's Hawks and Sharp-shinned Hawks were similar. The problem is we were just looking at their feathers, but they're structurally very, very different birds. You can't tell because these are scaled to the same size, but the Cooper's Hawk is much bigger than the Sharp-shinned Hawk. It has a much longer and structurally distinctive tail. It's bigger headed, and it has a rakish sort of angular or sort of squared off head. The Sharp-shinned Hawk is a small rounded head. It has a very, very big eye relative to the head. The Cooper's Hawk is a relatively small eye. I know these birds look the same if you just do the sort of simplistic thing and look at the feathers, which is what we did in the 1980s. But if you look at the structure of the bird, which is what we know to do in the 2020s, we see very, very different birds here. So these are sort of like binoculars here. And imagine yourselves in 1984 focusing on the feathers of these birds and saying, oh my gosh, they look almost the same. In the 2020s, we know to look at their structure. They're very, very different. Another way of looking at these birds is in flight. And here we have the same two species, the Cooper's Hawk flying over a Greenleaf Preserve in eastern Boulder County. This is actually one of my farthest afield images. That's a Sharp-shinned Hawk out in Routt County in Steamboat Springs. And structurally, very, very different birds. The Cooper's Hawk has these longer, rounded, sort of paddle-shaped wings, a much longer, also rounded tail. The Sharp-shinned Hawk is a smaller, more compact bird with a very sort of angular tail, and its head doesn't stick out nearly as far. Plumage-wise, feathers almost identical, structure very, very, very different. It's a different way of looking at the Cooper's Hawk 41 years later. There have been some other interesting differences. Here's an image from just a few months ago, 6 months ago, of a beautiful immature Cooper's Hawk. And this image I have chosen here specifically to sort of convey the idea of what we thought of Cooper's Hawks as in the year 1984. In the woods. Well, this is sort of a woods, it's a little riparian forest in eastern Boulder County. The Cooper's Hawk was, in fact, in the early 1980s, a woodland raptor, a reclusive, secretive, fairly rarely seen woodland raptor. Cooper's Hawks lived in woods in the 1980s. They don't, for the most part, live in woods anymore. Their habitat has changed in the past 40 years. And one of the most sort of striking examples of urbanization, of moving from one habitat into a really heavily developed human-modified landscape, the Cooper's Hawk, less heralded than some other birds like peregrine falcon, herring gull, Canada goose, have gone from being sort of a remote wilderness, borderline-ish, but also woodland bird to a much more urban raptor. And I think we're going to see a picture here of actually a bird at a bird feeder, which is something else that I wanted to tell you all about back in the early 1980s. This is a bird from just a couple of weeks ago on the Fountain Creek Christmas bird count. I don't think any of you all would think the Fountain Creek Christmas bird count, but it's supervising the thistle feeder here at the headquarters at the Fountain Creek Nature Center down in just south of Colorado Springs. And the Cooper's Hawk is, as we all know, sort of a notorious predator on small birds. And in this day and age, I think we understand, we recognize that Cooper's Hawks are entitled to a meal like any other organism is. By the way, I mean, if you eat an insect, that's just as bad for the insect as if you eat a cute little chickadee or something like that. And, but that signifies though another sort of real difference in how we regard the Cooper's Hawk. Now, by the 1980s, as we were beginning to become sort of more enlightened about raptors, I was sort of the generation that understood that Cooper's Hawks aren't all that bad. But we, by which I mean we as a society, hated, just abhorred, loathed, couldn't stand Cooper's Hawks for most of our, at least European time on this continent. If you go back to some of the most enlightened literature of the environmental movement, so the early 20th century writers like Melch Blanchard, Florence Merriam, Anna Boxford Comstock, they write lovingly and adoringly about everything from a house sparrow to a chipping sparrow to a caterpillar, but they let the Cooper's Hawk have it. You know, if you're a little boy with a shotgun or a slingshot, go kill the Cooper's Hawk. I mean, they just commended, and again, these are the heroines of the conservation movement 100 to 125 years ago. But Cooper's Hawks were bad birds, and they were very, very, very severely persecuted until the 1970s, and really sort of to some extent going into the 1980s. There have been laws on the books to protect Cooper's Hawks for more than 100 years now, but they weren't really sort of bought into by our culture until more like 40 or 50 years ago. So the Cooper's Hawk in 1984 is this bird that is hiding in forests because it doesn't want to be persecuted, that we as a society don't really, really like, and that we also think is really, really, really similar to the Sharp-shinned Hawk, which turned out not to be the case at all. We'll get to that a little bit later on. Now we see a scene like this and we think, oh, that's great, this hungry Cooper's Hawk needs to go eat a chickadee. Like, no one's really mad at the Cooper's Hawk anymore. And again, this is just south of Colorado Springs. This is not a particularly wooded area at all. It's down there in Fountain and all that. The military base, I can't remember its name down there, but Fort Carson, thank you very much. And so this is the Cooper's Hawk at the present time, and we're not even mad at this Cooper's Hawk anymore. Let's take a look at what we've got going here again. Okay, an urban Cooper's Hawk. Now, this is a juvenile Cooper's Hawk from last summer. And the reason I chose this image is because, although you can't quite tell it from here, this is in one of the busiest very, very near one of the busiest intersections in all of Colorado. This is just north of the intersection of Broadway or US 36 and, Broadway, I'm sorry, help me out here, Hannah, 28 or US 36 in Boulder and Arapahoe Road. Just, there's always, 500 cars, waiting to get to that intersection right there. And this bird was in a little homeless encampment just north of the intersection here, just hunting fox squirrels, Cyrus niger, the eastern fox squirrel. What these birds are for the most part doing now is eating fox squirrels, blue jays, and Eurasian collared doves. And that's really, really cool because all three of those are actually new to the Boulder area. The collared dove is quite new, but a lot of people don't realize the blue jay and the fox squirrel also are recent additions to the fauna of Boulder County. They got there in the 20s, early 30s. So these birds are eating, again, blue jays, fox squirrels, and collared doves, resources that no self-respecting, well, no respecting or any other form of Cooper's Hawk would have eaten in Colorado 100 years ago because we didn't have them 100 years ago. There is a collared dove, or the remains of a collared dove. Sorry for this image, was taken through a screen window in my kitchen. This is a common sight here. And the expansion of the collared dove, which has been an astounding biological phenomenon. I know we sometimes sort of dump on the poor collared dove, but it's actually one of the most amazing terrestrial vertebrate expansions and introductions ever documented. I know a lot of us sort of think about European starling and house sparrow and rock pigeon. What the collared dove has done and how fast it has done it is just amazing. I heard that it has recently actually crossed the Rubicon of the Bering Sea and has actually gone back into the old world in Russia now via Alaska. These birds are expanding so quickly. Does anybody know when the first collared dove showed up in Colorado? No, 1996. It's not all that long ago. And then they sort of kind of kept in really, really low numbers in southeastern Colorado until about like 2004, 2005. And then they just exploded. They hit Boulder the next year. They were in Juneau, and after that, they're in Barrow, and now they're back in Russia. It's an incredible expansion story. But the Cooper's Hawk has really, really made great use of this novel resource here and is eating collared doves everywhere they go. Moving right along, this is not a Cooper's Hawk. This is a northern goshawk. And I want to spend a little bit of time with a goshawk and then another bird in a moment here to sort of, again, set the stage for this new knowledge that we have about the Cooper's Hawk. So when I was a kid in the 1980s, we all knew that the Cooper's Hawk and the Sharp-shinned Hawk were incredibly closely related to each other. We always conjectured and speculated in the 1980s that the Cooper's hawk and the sharp-shinned hawk would be lumped into the same species, that the Cooper's hawk would probably be sort of conjoined with the sharp-shinned hawk and probably would be called the sharp-shinned hawk. There's actually a wonderfully futuristic short story by Pete Dunn, written in the 1980s. And he tells this futuristic tale. It actually takes place in the year 2024. I think that's so amazing. This is the year when they lumped the sharp-shinned, the Coopers. It's told from the perspective of an old biologist in 2050. No one else even remembers they used to be separate species. And you remember they were lumped in 2024. Oh my gosh, that's true. That's not what happened. Something did happen in 1984. So Pete was a prophet, but he was a prophet who was completely wrong. He got the date wrong, but he got the event the other way around. We discovered just a few months ago in 2024, in August of 2024, that not only are the Coopers and the sharp-shinned hawks not ever going to get lumped into the same species, they're not particularly closely related to each other at all. The closest relative in Colorado of the Cooper's hawk is not the sharp-shinned hawk. It is this bird, the northern goshawk. Now you can sort of see that this has a somewhat Cooper's hawk-like look about it. The plumage is very, very different. It's a bigger bird. But I have a question for you all. And if I see Nick Comer back there, you don't get to answer this because you probably know the answer to it. But and Hannah doesn't get the answer. But does anybody know? Okay, so the closest relative in Colorado of the Cooper's hawk is the northern goshawk. What's its second closest relative? So you take the Cooper's hawk and the goshawk as like a unit or a group. What's their nearest relative? I think I heard it. Harrier. It's the Northern Harrier. You're absolutely right. So this is the Northern Harrier just north of Denver at Rocky Mountain National Wildlife Refuge a few months ago. And by the way, you know, I'm asking you all to have sort of like a think outside the box, like open your minds kind of moment. Doesn't that actually kind of look like a Cooper's hawk? I mean, look, it's long-tailed, it's got those paddle-shaped wings. Have you ever noticed that Cooper's hawks, although they're not white above, the white underneath often wraps up around and gives them the appearance of a white-rumped appearance? Cooper's hawks, just like harriers, have this spectacular aerial courtship display that they're doing right now. They flap their wings very, very sort of slowly like a butterfly like this. They fan their long tails about like paddles. The Cooper's hawk and the Northern Harrier, I think, are a greatly underappreciated ID problem. I think a lot of us, myself included, have actually probably incorrectly identified a Cooper's hawk as a Northern Harrier and vice versa. So again, this is not a sharp-shinned hawk or anything that looks like the Cooper's hawk is not a sharp-shinned hawk or anything that looks like a sharp-shinned hawk. It's actually more closely related to the Northern Harrier than the bird we all thought was its closest relative, and isn't really a particularly close relative at all. We'll take a little bit of a break before we look at our next image here, but this goes back to a sort of a 1984 musings, if I may here, about the way that birds actually change. So we've been talking a lot here about our changing attitudes or orientation or outlook on the Cooper's hawk, but I've also alluded to the fact that it's doing different things. It's eating collar doves. It's urbanized. It's not scared of people anymore. And as somebody who, professionally is involved in producing resources for identifying birds, field guides, bird magazines, and stuff like that, I very often get asked the question, do we really need another bird book? Aren't birds the same as they were 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago? And the answer is really an emphatic no, not at all. Birds really do change. I was thinking about that this morning. I was at, afternoon actually, I was at the feeder at Greenlee Preserve by my house, and didn't see any Cooper's hawks there, although I often do, but there was a white-throated sparrow there. And the white-throated sparrow, familiar bird, especially for anybody from back east, is a bird that has undergone dramatic changes in the past 40 years. In just the past 10 or 12 years, the white-throated sparrow, which has two very, very famous songs, you probably know some of them, one of them goes, and the other, actually added a third song to its repertoire just the past 12 years. It goes like this. This song, we know exactly where it originates because it was recorded in upstate New York. And we watch as this song is spread over the entire population. The white-throated sparrow is one of the most common birds in North America. There are millions of pairs. They all sing this song. They've all learned it in the past 10 or 12 years. And if you read a field guide from only 10 or 12 years ago, it does not correctly identify for you the song of the white-throated sparrow. You need to buy new field guides. But here's another even sort of more amazing change. The white-throated sparrow has gotten notably, I mean, not just sort of statistically, but biologically, importantly, smaller in the past 40 or 50 years. We have very, very careful studies from a field site in Pennsylvania and also some other sites, Ontario, New York, and there's another one back east, where they measured all these so-called morphometrics of the bird, how long the wings are, how long the tarsus is, how long the bird is from head to tail. White-throated sparrows are about 20 to 30% smaller than they were only 40 or 50 years ago. And this is a very likely genetic change. We don't know the genetics of it all now, but it's very hard to explain such a change like that other than in genetics. We do know, I'm going to come back to Cooper's Hawks in just a moment here, that other birds have undergone some amazing genetically determined changes very, very recently. Two of them are on the Hawaiian Islands. Two of the indigenous forest songbirds there, the apapane, which is a widespread, beautiful red bird, and the Hawaii amakihi, which is mostly on Hawaii Islands, also islands, have evolved malaria resistance in just the past 15 years. They've gone from almost entirely susceptible to malaria to almost completely resistant to malaria in just 15 years. And that's a 100% genetic change. There's no cultural or behavioral component to that at all. Birds evolve really, 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 really fast. Whether they are behavioral changes like the song of the white-throated sparrow or genetic changes like changes in resistance to malaria, birds change really, really fast. And it's cool for me to think back on the Cooper's hawk and to realize how it's such a different bird from what it used to be. I think I have a few more images here. I do indeed. Here are some more sharp-shinned and Cooper's hawks for you. And Cooper's hawk on the left, sharp-shinned hawk on the right. A little bit misleading here. I made the sharp-shinned hawk a bit bigger than it really is over here. But the plumage here are almost identical. So this raises a question. If the sharp-shinned hawk and the Cooper's hawk are so different from one another, why the heck do sharp-shinned hawks look just like Cooper's hawks? And Nick Comer can't answer this question because he and I were talking about this beforehand. But have any of you all ever seen a sharp-shinned hawk in South America? Does anybody know what a sharp-shinned hawk looks like in South America? Okay. If you go online, don't do it while I'm talking, but if you go online afterwards during the Q&A or something like that, and Google or go to the Macaulay, the eBird website, and look at pictures of sharp-shinned hawks from South America, you won't believe your eyes. They look so different. They don't look like any hawk you've ever seen or even imagined. They're so incredibly different. So check this out. The sharp-shinned hawk has this vast range, Alaska, well down south in South America, south of the Amazon basin, actually. The Cooper's hawk is a more range-restricted raptor. It's essentially a NAFTA bird, United States, Canada, and most of Mexico. So as soon as the sharp-shinned hawks get into the range of the Cooper's hawks, they start looking like Cooper's hawks. Once there are no Cooper's hawks, they look like a completely different bird. It's a classic example of, I had to talk about interordinal patterns. This is an interspecific pattern here, but of mimicry. The sharp-shinned hawks benefit from looking like this tough, fierce raptor where that raptor occurs. So all throughout the range of the Cooper's hawk, sharp-shinned hawks have evolved to look like Cooper's hawks. But in the parts of the sharp-shinned hawks range where there are no Cooper's hawk, well, there's no model to base it on, so it just looks like the way sharp-shinned hawks used to look like. So this bird, the entire population of the sharp-shinned hawk, again, a very different bird, structurally different, biologically different, evolutionarily different, just a different bird. It looks the same as Cooper's hawk, to be scary like a Cooper's hawk. There are dozens of examples of this where you have a small bird that looks like a big bird. A lot of the trogons, mountain trogons, some of the other raptors in South America, the small bird looks like the big bird to be scary. That's actually what's going on with the sharp-shinned hawk and the Cooper's hawk. We're just sort of too stupid to figure out, well, maybe they're not related to each other, maybe one's imitating or mimicking the other one. All right. Here's another Cooper's hawk. For a whole bunch of reasons. It's a great big bird with a big head and a big long tail. This is, of course, a juvenile Cooper's hawk here because it doesn't have the blue on the tail and the rest of the body here. I want to start to wrap up my remarks this evening now with some things that all of us can do to understand Cooper's hawks better ourselves, to promote general knowledge and understanding and awareness about Cooper's hawks. I hope also to sort of maybe be open to the possibility that Cooper's hawks might expand and open our minds as well. So this is a pretty normal looking Cooper's hawk. I had been breeding, not avo breeding, but just breeding all by itself here. This is out at the Walden Ponds Wildlife Habitat area in eastern Boulder County. Here's another, I think, if I got this in the right sequence here, Cooper's hawk. This is one at Wanaka Lake. It's a juvenile Cooper's hawk here. The image is sort of distant right here. Cooper's hawks, by the way, often will feed on aquatic organisms. So this one was just foraging for probably crayfish. They eat crayfish, among other things here. And you may have noticed something peculiar about this bird. One of its tail feathers isn't right. So this is a brown first year juvenile or young Cooper's hawk, but it has an adult feather on it. Yeah, this is a blue and black feather of an adult Cooper's hawk. It also has that little nice white tip there. And well, I'm pretty sure what has happened here is that this bird just lost one of its tail feathers. That does happen. And I took this image in December, by which time the bird probably had enough adult hormones in it when it replaced this feather to replace it with an adult feather as opposed to a retained or juvenile feather. This is actually a fairly common behavior. We see it in our bush tits all the time. Bush tits lose tail feathers constantly because their tails are too long and always whacking about the bushes and stuff like that. And when they grow back, you never really know what feather generation is going to grow back in. Now, this is on the one hand sort of just a one-off, a trivial observation of a bird that grew in an adult feather too early. This is really cool to me. If you go to the museum record, or by the way, just to the scientific record before about the year 2010, there's like no attestation of this behavior at all, because there really isn't much documentation of Cooper's hawks until about 15 or 20 years ago, because none of us were using cameras 15 or 20 years ago, but now all of us take cameras and take thousands of images and upload them to the Macaulay database. Now, I love museums. I've done a lot of work in museums, but check this out. You know, and I'm just being objective here, by far the biggest and most valuable museum collection on Earth is the Macaulay database, those images that you can look at online. If you take the combined bird collections of the American Museum in New York, the British Museum, the greatest museums in India and elsewhere in Asia, they're just a fraction of the photos, and they're really, really, really good photos at the Macaulay Library. We are revolutionizing our learning about birds because people are taking so many pictures like this, putting them on the Macaulay Library, and anybody can go out there and study them. And I think that's really cool. A picture like this, just a old Cooper's hawk, not old, a young Cooper's hawk, taking a bath in Wanaka Lake actually conveys some pretty cool biological information. All of us can do that. Here's another very young Cooper's hawk. This is a juvenile over at Hecla Pond in Louisville, Colorado. One thing I want to point out here is that the eye is that sort of golden yellow. This is another area where museums just sort of fail us. You can't, for the most part, preserve a bird's eye. They don't preserve the way that feathers do. So we don't have a good record of eye color in birds. But again, in the past 10 or 12 years, with everybody taking digital photos, we can very, very carefully begin to sort of document and chronicle eye color changes in birds as they get older. For example, Cooper's hawks, juvenile Cooper's hawks and adult Cooper's hawks have different eye color. Here is another juvenile Cooper's hawk. Hannah spoke earlier about the crop, that sort of food storage organism on raptors, and we saw that on her caracara. This guy is eating like 5 fox squirrels or something like that. Yeah, that's the crop up there. And again, just sort of cool behavior. If this were a bird in a museum, well, the first thing you do would be to take out the stomach contents. That's what we do, or the crop contents in this case. And also, I'm going to go into a little bit of a provocative or controversial area here, but you know, back in the day when we had film, remember like 24, what are they called, frames per roll, and it cost money and stuff like that. I mean, who would waste their money on a, bloated juvenile Cooper's hawk with a distended crop? Nobody would, because you want that perfect adult profile. There are lots and lots. These are all free images. You can make thousands of these, not pay anything for them. And it's really, really cool that the Macaulay Library is chronicling these cool behaviors like this very, very, very sated juvenile Cooper's hawk at Wanaka Lake in Colorado. I've got a couple of other images for you all here. Yeah, okay, so this is, well, what is, anybody know what this is? It's actually not a collared dove, but I've mentioned this bird before. It is a blue jay. But this is going to sound really, really, really weird, but Hannah's just going to cringe at this, but come on, y'all are my age. So you remember the scene at the beginning of Star Wars where there's that really, really big ship. You think it's really, really cool, and like we were all amazed by it. And then there was a much bigger ship. Like, did you guys catch the much bigger ship up here? Yeah, okay, so this is a Cooper's hawk eating a blue jay. And the reason I wanted to put this image up here was because it kind of gets at all the points I've made so far this afternoon, whatever time of day it is. This is a really, really big bird. And this is such a trivial thing to say, but Cooper's hawks are much bigger than sharp-shinned hawks. Like, they're really big birds compared to sharp-shinned hawks. It's just so weird to me that we thought they were so similar. Like, just look at the difference in size, like comparing a Chihuahua with a Great Dane. I mean, not quite, but they're really, really different in size here. This is a very, very urban Cooper's hawk. It's right in a sort of really, really built up part of eastern Boulder County, and it's eating a blue jay right here. Speaking of eating blue jays, this is odd, but I want to talk about a vocalization that Cooper's hawks make and also blue jays make, and this is pretty cool. I don't have the sound to play for you all here, but I think this is a sound spectrogram of a Cooper's hawk that I audio recorded in Lafayette, and you can see the sound here. It's sort of technical here, but this is basically the musical score of the spectrogram itself. This is what we call the oscillogram or waveform function, showing how loud or how much sound energy is produced here. So this note here at 1.3 seconds is that nasal deck. Wait for a while. Deck. Deck. You probably know this sound. So deck. 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 That's the sound of the Cooper's hawk. I've got a couple of soapbox points to make here. Isn't it weird that when you read the voluminous literature on how to tell Cooper's hawks from sharp-shinned hawks, that nobody ever talks about the differences in vocalizations? They don't sound anything alike. The sharp-shinned hawk has this sort of gull-like squeal, ooh, 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 sort of a anxious and anguish sounding. This is a powerful nasal kind of honking sound. They are so different from one another. But the ability to make these sound spectrograms and also the corresponding oscillograms is a new thing for us. We can go out today with our phones, like literally our phones here, point it in the direction of a Cooper's hawk and obtain output like this, which would have been inaccessible to any of us just 15 or 20 years ago. Every single one of us can generate output like this. Not a one of us, unless we were professional sound recordists, of which there were like 3 in the entire realm of ornithology until about the year 2005, can do something like this right now. Talk about birds changing people. How about birds changing birds? Okay, so the blue jay is a very, very famous mimic. In the eastern parts of the United States, it especially mimics or imitates the red-shouldered hawk. And in this part of the world, the Swainson's hawk. Except blue jays have figured out that Cooper's hawks are especially fearsome. And blue jays all over the Front Range metro region have been imitating Cooper's hawks for the past 5 to 6 years. I still haven't recorded one doing. I sure have heard it. I'm sure some folks have done it. But it's really, really cool to me, the blue jay, which has this sort of reading about like almost innate or like instinctive, like sort of predilection for imitating the red-shouldered hawk in the east and the Swainson's hawk in the west, has gone over to Cooper's hawk. And it makes sense. There are Cooper's hawks everywhere where blue jays occur, get eaten by Cooper's hawks, and Cooper's hawks are big and fierce, and blue jays are starting to sound like Cooper's hawks, which I think is really cool. All right, moving right along here. Here is another Cooper's hawk, and I really am sort of getting into my final remarks right here. This is a Cooper's hawk, by the way, in downtown Denver. This is right at City Park and pretty much, the most congested and built up part of all of Denver right here. We're addressing matter here that is not really biological at all, but it's cultural. And this has to do with the matter. Actually, we spoke about this obliquely at dinner today about birds that are named for people. So the Cooper's hawk is named for William, I think, Cooper. Somebody should Google that for me. I think William Cooper is the eponym for the Cooper's hawk right here. And the question has arisen, are we at a point culturally and socially and sort of, historically at which some of these older names, birds named for people, need to be retired? Now, you know me, I harbor lots and lots of opinions. I'm actually, though, going to stay away from the debate about whether we should change birds' names or not, and to sort of go all the way to the end run and say, well, let's say we have changed the name of the Cooper's hawk. What should the new name of the Cooper's hawk be? The bird that we used to think was really, really similar to it, oh my gosh, I just thought of something. When I said goshawk, did I say goshawk?
You did.
Oh, is this like when the pit opens up before me and I fall down? I've been exposed. It's called the American goshawk now. Can't believe you guys. Where were the howls of protest when I did that? American goshawk. I'll never live this one down. This is the part we canceled from the Zoom presentation. But anyhow, so this bird here, the Cooper's hawk here, is possibly in need of a new name. Now, this bird that we used to think was really, really similar, the Sharp-shinned Hawk, has kind of like a good, bad name. Like, like sharp-shinned. I mean, this is the shin, and sharp is like a knife or something like that. Like, it's like a well-meaning name. What that refers to is simply the thin tarsus. So the sharp-shinned hawk has a very thin tarsus, and the Cooper's hawk, you can't see the tarsus here, but trust me, it's a thicker tarsus on the Cooper's hawk. So we could call it like what would we call it, the fat-shinned hawk, or the thick-shinned hawk, or the dull-shinned hawk. I'm not really sure what we could call that bird, but I don't want to do that at all. How about a name that actually sort of gets at, like, not only the essence of this bird, like what it is and what it does, but also what we've learned about it in the past 30, 40, or 50 years. Here comes my theme and my answer. So this is a Cooper's hawk in downtown Denver. Here's a Cooper's hawk almost in downtown Tucson, Arizona. You guys think Denver is getting out of hand? Tucson, like, it goes like halfway down to Mexico and beyond. That city's just massive. And there are Cooper's hawks all over Tucson. And here's a city that is also getting really, really, really big. St. George, Utah is now actually one of like the biggest cities in the Mountain Time Zone. And there are Cooper's hawks nesting all over downtown St. George. I think we should call the Cooper's hawk the urban goshawk. Now, urban goshawk. So here's the deal. The first thing is, we now know that the Cooper's hawk is a goshawk. So I told you its closest relative is the goshawk, was taken out of its old genus Accipiter and is now put in this new goshawk genus Astur, and A-S-T-U-R, not A-S-T-E-R. There are also goshawks elsewhere in the world that are in this genus Astur. So the Cooper's hawk is a kind of goshawk. So that's the goshawk part of it. And also it has rapidly and dramatically and really extraordinarily urbanized. One thing I wanted to say, I was going to say it earlier, but I forgot to say it, but I'm going to say it right now, is that the urbanization of the Cooper's hawk also has sort of secretly encoded with it some fascinating and also kind of disturbing and kind of disheartening cultural information within it. Did anybody go to that amazing talk by Ali Davidge at the DFO about a year ago on Cooper's hawks and redlining? Yes, so check this out. The Cooper's hawk is an incredibly accurate statistical proxy for whether an urban environment was redlined. And redline refers to the practice of deliberately segregating neighborhoods, typically putting people who aren't white European descent in neighborhoods that have poorer services, more dangerous chemicals, and also more exposure to heat and to the elements. And if you look at where Cooper's hawks occur in Denver, Phoenix, Los Angeles, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, they occur in white neighborhoods. And where they don't occur is in black and brown neighborhoods. Now, obviously, the Cooper's hawks are not personally discriminating. But the thing is that neighborhoods in Denver that have lots and lots of trees in them are neighborhoods that didn't have black people in them until about 40 or 50 years ago. The Cooper's hawk is actually the best predictor of whether a neighborhood was redlined of any predictor that Ali could find, including like the really obvious ones like schools, buses, urban appropriations. Cooper's hawks tell us whether or not a neighborhood was racially discriminated against. I should say the absence of a Cooper's hawk does. Cooper's hawks are all over urban America right now, but they're typically in neighborhoods that were white, majority white, 50 to 100 years ago, not in neighborhoods that were minority, 50 or 100 years ago. It's a really, really urban bird. So that's why I want to call it the urban goshawk. Now, I'm going to go to the weeds here. Again, sorry, a little bit on the nerdy side here. Any of you all know about the scandal of the urban goshawk? Was that a knowing cackle? Okay, so this is a really wild story. Like, just bear with me. And I'm going to be done after this because this is just a crazy story. So there's this kind of well, it's okay to say this. I know this is going to be recorded somewhere, but like an unusual personality out there who has claimed to see in the past 20 years lots and lots of what he called urban goshawks. Now, they weren't goshawks. They weren't American goshawks at all. They were Cooper's hawks. He just made a mistake. But I'm having this like really weird moment now where I'm thinking, no, this guy actually got it all right. It's true that he misidentified them. But what he was onto is something most of us weren't onto at all, which was the urbanization of Cooper's hawks. He just thought they were goshawks. He made a mistake. And he even called them urban goshawks. That's the name that he gave to them. We all laughed at him. I mean, it's sort of a sad story. But I mean, we just sort of made fun of this person for his urban goshawks. And like, he was actually right. you just had the wrong species in mind altogether. The urbanization of the goshawk, the urbanization of the urban goshawk, of the Cooper's hawk, is a really, really striking thing. It's been ongoing. We recognize it now. It's just something that sort of emerged in our collective consciousness. And I think that's just really, really cool. There are other birds out there like that: the barred owl, the pileated woodpecker, the wild turkey, herring gull, lots of birds that have become urbanized. But I think we've been sort of gradually aware of it because they're kind of iconic birds, turkeys and bald eagles, and even Canada geese. The Cooper's hawk just sort of snuck in very stealthily. Like, yeah, 2024 presentation there, and it's urbanized right before our very eyes. I think that's really, really cool. I believe I have one final image for you here. Yes, this is that Cooper's hawk there at the busy intersection of Arapahoe and 28th in downtown Boulder. And this was the moment before it ended the life of an eastern fox squirrel here. But he's sort of just looking right at us and saying, come on, y'all, like, study me, research me, understand me, engage me, appreciate what I'm all about here. And I guess if I can leave you all now with a mission or a message or something like that, that would be my message to you all. You know, by the way, today is what, the 9th of January. So it's still early enough for you all to adopt New Year's resolutions. Did you know that something like 98% of all New Year's resolutions are violated by the 10th? That's tomorrow morning. So most of you all have even made resolutions. It's over by now. So you need a really good new resolution for you. And I've got it for you right now. And that's it. Just go out this year and watch birds. Like, study them, pay attention to them. You'll just a common bird, like a Cooper's hawk, if you're flopping around downtown Boulder several months ago. But do more than that. You know, share the knowledge with other people. If you're a photographer, take pictures. If you're an educator, educate. If you do outreach, do outreach. If you're an internet influencer, be an internet influencer. There are just so many cool stories to be told out there about birds. And I think that, you know, taking a grand view of things here, you know, people who like pay attention to birds, I think, like, they're good people. People who pay attention to birds sort of understand how the world works. I find it a lot of bird watchers. They're like really, really good people because they're connected with nature. They're connected with what we're really all about here. So go out there, watch birds, engage birds in nature, share the wonder of birds with everybody. Got a lot of kind of weird stuff coming up potentially in the future trajectory of the United States and the world. But if we all watch birds and share birds with one another, what we learn about birds, what we question about birds, what we conjecture about birds, I think we'll be probably just fine. So that's the message from me. That's the message from our Cooper's hawk. I'll wrap things up now, say good night, and thank you for your attention.
Well, I'm sorry, our technical difficulties cut into time here. We can spare like 10 or 15 minutes for question, probably more like 10.
And also, but the most urgent matter of all is before anybody goes away, I need selfies of me with Ruth, Tom, and Nick. So you guys can't leave on taking pictures. Anyway, Hannah, do you want to come back up here for the questions? Ask her the questions. I'm all talked out. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you referred to the fact that the sharp-shinned that are up further north can mimic the Coopers. I'm sure that that wasn't the impetus for them to make that change to become more an appearance like the Coopers. Is there some factors that have been found that have made that change?
Yeah, so that's the question. So the question is sort of why did the Sharp-shinned Hawks decide to look like Cooper's hawks? And I'm being very anthropomorphic in the way I'm sort of responding to or framing the question right there. But that's a matter of sort of before any human beings were recording what was going on there. We don't really have a good record of when Sharp-shinned Hawks potentially moved into the range of the Cooper's hawk. It's likely a tropical bird, just given that a vast part of the Sharp-shinned Hawks range is in South America, where there are no Cooper's hawks. But the pattern of one species, typically a smaller or weaker or less defended species, appearing like another is extremely common in vertebrates, especially with birds. So I don't think it's, my guess is, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe Hannah will do research and figure out something to the contrary. I don't think we're able to reconstruct exactly why that happens, but the almost perfect concordance between look-alike Sharp-shinned Hawks where they overlap with Cooper's hawks, and very, very different elsewhere. It strongly suggests mimicry as the causal mechanism. Oh, back here,
About 1975,
before the time of this talk.
about 1975, the Christmas count in Fairfax County and going out to Dulles Airport.
Hmm.
The team came back to the reporting session, very excited. The judges or the presiding people were from Patuxent. The team reported at Cooper's Hawk. The Patuxent people said, that's impossible. It tore them apart. By the time the judges were through with the team, they thought they'd seen a chicken.
Well, all right.
It couldn't be.
Times have changed. Did anybody have a question for Hannah, by the way? Oh, is that a Hannah question?
That's not a question, it's just that if you had been in New Jersey about 15 years ago, you wouldn't see a black vulture.
That's right.
And it's very rare to find them down in Cape May. And another, because of this climate change, they're moving north, is the white ibis.
Right.
If you saw about 5 years ago, if you saw one or two white ibis, it was a big deal. Now they're breeding by the hundreds in New Jersey.
You know, that's more personal than you might imagine. So I had never seen a white ibis in New Jersey until mid-October of this year with Hannah. So, and my total white ibis count for New Jersey went from 0 to like 475 in 15 minutes. It's incredible what white ibises have done there. Yeah, and that whole sort of business of birds.
Ocean City, where the rookery is.
Oh, yeah, and this was farther north actually, but yeah, so, black vulture, the kites, like a swallowtail kite, especially Mississippi kite. Even, I mean, birds that have been doing this for a longer period of time, Carolina chickadee, northern mockingbird, tufted titmouse, just sort of gradually moving north. But yeah, the black vulture, except in like Cape May, far south in New Jersey, would have been a fairly, good bird in central New Jersey. By the way, they're leapfrogging north through, trash dumps. They really flourish around garbage. Oh, thank you, John. John was a public service announcement here. I have brought all the way from down in Boulder, copies of Birding Magazine, including, John, can you hold that up again? An issue of Birding Magazine that probably some of you all haven't even seen yet. That is the brand new January issue of Birding with the glossy, glorious Bird of the Year stickers. You can put those on eBay for like $80, actually. So get yourself a copy of Birding Magazine. I do not want to take those back down with me to Lafayette tonight. So take magazines away from you, John. Thank you very much. There was a question, and it's a question for me or for Hannah?
I have one for Hannah.
Okay.
So I was wondering, when you were talking about this observation of like that preening behavior.
Yes.
Was it happening to be like before or after they would come into contact with like a turtle egg nest? Or is it like just random happenstance?
That's a great question. So for this specific instance, I don't recall when exactly we saw this. We only observed this about once or twice, and it actually happened on 2 days, like 2 consecutive days, and then we never saw it again. But another time we saw this afterwards, and I actually didn't have my camera, and it happened right after they had raided one of the nests, and we went over and went and looked at. Like, we went to go try to salvage whatever there was left, and I remember there was no eggs left by that point. But right for that second time that we had observed it, it was right after they had ravaged the nest, which then raises the question, of course, about parasites and what kind of things they might have picked up in the nest. Because I don't know if y'all have been around turtle egg nests, but once they're ravaged, they're kind of disgusting to be around. The eggs are extremely pungent, and they're not very pleasant to be around, even like 5 minutes after the fact. Yes.
I have 2 questions.
For who?
For Hannah.
Excellent. Go for it.
Where you were in OSA, was that Puro?
Yeah, that was Playa Puro.
Yeah.
How did you know that?
I've been there. It's great.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was.
Second question, the college I taught at, Denison University, has had black and turkey vultures roosting on its buildings for probably 20 years now, all year long. Is there any observations of interspecific breeding between those 2 species? Because black vulture often treats the turkey vulture pretty badly.
Interesting. From what I have read with black vultures and I was looking through the literature with black vultures and caracaras. I don't think I came across anything with black vulture and turkey vulture. I came across a lot of stuff. There's a lot of interspecific allopregnating with cowbirds, and then there was one other. I also actually in the early parts of this when we were having some technical difficulties. I came across a paper with, I think it was, I can't remember what it was, a little owl and one other owl that they observed it with, but I did not see anything with black vulture and turkey vulture, but that would certainly be an interesting observation, and also kind of, I think, would make sense because like you said, their ranges can, I mean,
Do you
even
have turkey
where
vultures on Princeton campus?
turkey vultures in Princeton, yeah. Actually,
They're everywhere.
they're everywhere. I see black vultures, now I'm thinking about it, I see black vultures a lot more though than turkey vultures, but yeah, you can get both.
The question for you and for you, please. So you were saying that the vulture and the caracara go to the turtle nest. So I lived in Florida and I saw turtles lay their eggs. And they generally, I mean, they're pushing the sand and they go down pretty deep and then they cover them. So how do the birds get to the eggs, which are far deep?
So the coatis, the mammals, they kind of look like raccoons. They're kind of like they also do have raccoons in Costa Rica, but coatis are kind of a very, there was a picture of one up here. They have a very long nose. They're the ones that will do the digging and then kind of pull up the nest, do all the dirty work. And then the turkey vultures, black vultures, and then crested caracaras will come in at the end once kind of all the eggs have either been crushed or the nest is already kind of dug up, especially the vultures, because they're scavengers. They'll come up once everything's kind of dead, if you will. I guess the turtle eggs they're just like yolks at that point, but they'll come and take everything once the nest has been dug up by another animal that also digs up that I didn't talk about because I never got good photos of them. They actually have little anteaters that would also come and dig up the nest as well. And even though they're so cute, they were very, very, very annoying for our conservation efforts this summer.
Okay. And for you real quick, so I think I had a Cooper's nest around in my tree. And you spoke of how they eat blue jays and collared doves. Do they eat rabbits? Because I had some rabbits' hearts left in my
In
yard.
general, they don't. Rabbits are too big for them, really. Fox squirrels are out the.
If these were babies though?
Maybe, but the rabbit eaters in our are red-tailed hawks. Red-tailed hawks really like to eat rabbits, and then also in more open areas where we can talk to the golden eagles. But I think that the a good sized cottontail is probably a bit much for a grizzly hawk.
Okay.
Oh,
We have a question for Hannah from Zoom. Are you familiar with the smell capabilities of black vultures and caracaras at all? They've only heard of turkey vultures having superior smell, but that you mentioned the turtle nests not smelling very great, triggered the thought.
Did you want to speak to me? I think he wanted to speak
The
to them.
question has been shunted to me. Yeah, so it's kind of a cool difference between the turkey vulture and the black vulture. The turkey vulture has an extraordinary sense of smell, and the black vulture apparently does not. That's one of the reasons that I think Tom was getting to that point. Black vultures associate with turkey vultures. It's a sort of a parasitic, or at least an unwanted affection by black vultures directed toward turkey vultures. I'm guessing, and I was not there for this observation, but that the black vultures are just, they're hanging on. They're just sort of, they're opportunistic. They see the coatis and maybe the anteaters doing their thing, but it's kind of interesting. I mean, the black vultures and turkey vultures, definitely the same family of birds. One of them with an extraordinary ability to smell. Birds, by the way, in general, birds don't smell good. Their sense of smell isn't very, very good. Black vultures are sort of typically poorly blessed olfactorily, or something. But turkey vultures are unusual in that regard. So yeah, my long-winded answer to that question is, I'm guessing there was not an olfactory component to it. But I wasn't there, so what do I know?
You would also, it was pretty, once a coati found a nest, it was game over. The entire, there was probably about 10 or 15 black vultures and turkey vultures that would routinely just patrol up and down the beach. And part of the reason we carried binoculars with us was so that we could look down, because we had about a mile stretch of beach. And literally there was 4 of us one of the person's jobs, whenever they saw a gathering of black vultures or turkey vultures or coatis, they had to sprint down the beach and try to like scare off everything as fast as possible, because once the nest is ravaged, it's kind of over. Sometimes you could save like 10 eggs, but once the coati got to it, it was kind of the end of the story, unfortunately.
All right, I think we better wrap it up there. Hannah and Ted for really interesting presentations. We're lucky to have guest speakers like you, so thank you very much. Hope to see everybody at our next program on February 13th, Bird Window Collisions and Solutions. There's a few free copies of magazines and